Most people know us for our legendary quick change rear ends, but Winter's Performance was founded in 1958 as a transmission company. And today, our Falcon, Raptor, and Phoenix racing transmissions are used by many of the top late model and modified teams across the country. Here we'll spend time with Blair, who's building a Falcon Roller Slide transmission. We start by building the cluster gear and clutch pack assembly and installing it in the transmission case with a dummy shaft. This transmission has our optional black thermal dispersant coating, which helps keep the transmission's internal operating temperature right where it needs to be. Once we've checked our clearances, the dummy shaft is removed and the countershaft is installed. Next, we use a dial gauge to check the clutch travel. Travel should be between 40 and 60 thousandths. This can be adjusted at the top end or the travel side of the clutch using different sized shims. The travel measurement is marked on the face of the case. With the clutch shimmed and the proper travel set, the countershaft is driven into place. Next, the reverse countershaft is partially installed. Then the reverse gear is lubricated and slid over the shaft. A roll pin on the end of the reverse countershaft keeps the shaft from rotating within the transmission. We align the pin with the recess in the case prior to driving the countershaft into position. Now we move over to our press, where we have the input shaft set up on one of our two-piece installation tools. After setting the case over the shaft, we press the bearing onto the input shaft using the tool below to support it from the bottom, and a second tool on the press itself to set the bearing in place. Once the bearing is pressed onto the shaft, we remove the bottom tool and press the shaft again, seating it within the case. Next, we install a snap ring to secure the input shaft bearing. Then an O-ring is installed in the greased groove of the seal plate before the plate is installed, taking care to align it with the oil return hole on the transmission case. Each of the 4 seal plate bolts are coated with thread sealant and tightened to 15 foot-pounds. Then we grease the bearings prior to installing the seals for the shift shafts. The next step is to install the tail housing, which we've already fitted with the slider shaft and gear. After installing 3 push rods and a gasket on the main case, the slider gear is fed into the transmission, checking that everything is aligned properly. Then the shift shafts are installed. The low gear, neutral, and direct drive shaft is on top, shown at left from this angle, and the reverse shaft is on the bottom, or at right here. With the shaft sliding smoothly, the bolts attaching the tail housing to the main case are coated with thread sealant and torqued to 35 foot-pounds. The roller slide uses detent balls to lock the yoke into the sliding shaft assembly. Each of these 15 balls is set on the end of the sliding shaft, making sure they're clear of debris. When installed properly, the yoke will seat on the detent balls without rocking. Then the balls are greased to prevent oxidation. The yoke is installed using an ARP bolt and washer. Anti-seize is applied between the washer and bolt, and red Loctite is applied to the threads. The bolt is tightened using a special tool that provides a great deal of leverage to the yoke while we tighten it to 240 foot-pounds. When installing the forward shift fork, we use red Loctite and tighten the set screw until it contacts the shift shaft. Then we double check to make sure it's in the detent groove before locking it down. The same process is repeated for the reverse shift fork, only using blue Loctite. With the shift forks installed, we can check that the clutch engages smoothly with reverse and low gear by blowing compressed air into a compression fitting on the tail housing. If everything is working as it should, we lubricate the forward and reverse shift forks and gears, spinning the yoke to cycle the grease. Then we test the clutch one more time with compressed air. Detent balls and springs are installed in the side of the main case and secured by the side cover. 3 of the 8 side cover bolts go in threaded holes that go all the way through the casting wall, so they'll be wrapped in thread sealant. Another 2 bolts secure the breather tube as well as the side cover. After all 8 bolts are snug, they'll be tightened to 15 foot-pounds. The fitting for the breather tube is taped to the tube and should be installed in the side plate once the transmission is installed in the car. On the roller slide transmissions, there's a detent screw and spring with a jam nut on the top of the case for adjusting the forward shift shaft. We set it at our factory by tightening the adjustment screw until it's snug, then backing it off 1.5 turns and locking down the jam nut. Once the transmission is in your car, if it pops out of gear, that detent screw may be too loose, and if the transmission won't engage, the screw could be too tight. Simply back off the jam nut on this adjustment screw and either tighten or loosen it up to a 1/2 turn, then retighten the jam nut. All transmissions ship with a filler plate that's designed to keep all the plugs for the shift shafts in place if you're using a skeletonized bell housing. This can be discarded if you're using a standard bell housing. Once assembly is complete, the last step is installing the Winters serial number plate. Then it's into a box and out the door to one of our customers or dealers. Once the transmission's installed in the car, fill it with Type F automatic transmission fluid to the bottom of the fill port on the side of the transmission opposite the side plate. If you have any questions about your Winters transmission, you can call or email us anytime and one of our assembly technicians will be happy to help.